In 2013, Chris and Shannon Watts purchased a newly built, 5-bedroom home at 2825 Saratoga Trail in Frederick, Colorado. It was a spacious 2-story house in a quiet, family-oriented neighborhood. For Shannon, it was a dream come true, the kind of place she had always wanted, with room for their growing family. She proudly shared photos of the house online, describing it as a symbol of everything she and Chris had worked for. At that time, Chris was working for Anadarko Petroleum, and Shannon had built a career with Thrive, a health and lifestyle company. Their 2 daughters, Bella and Celeste, known affectionately as Cece, filled the home with the kind of noise that made the walls feel alive. To anyone passing by, the Watts family looked like they had built a perfect life. But behind closed doors, something was quietly unraveling. Shannon, who documented much of her life on social media, often appeared cheerful and strong. Her posts showed a confident woman, deeply committed to her family. But privately, she carried concerns, about finances, about Chris's growing distance, and about the stability of their marriage. The Saratoga Trail home had come with heavy mortgage payments, and by 2015, the couple had filed for bankruptcy. Yet, Shannon believed they were pushing through. She had faith that better days were coming. When she became pregnant again in 2018, she saw it as a new beginning, a chance to bring the family closer. But that year would turn out to be the family's last in the house. As Shannon traveled for work that summer, she began noticing that Chris was behaving differently. Friends later recalled that she seemed anxious and unsure about what was happening. Her husband had grown distant, quieter, colder. When she returned from a business trip in August 2018, she hoped they could talk things through. What followed in the early hours of August 13 would forever change the story of 2825 Saratoga Trail. That morning, Shannon's friend, Nicole Atkinson, became worried when Shannon missed a doctor's appointment and didn't respond to calls or texts. Nicole drove to the Watts home and alerted police. Officers arrived to find Shannon's car in the garage, her phone and purse still inside. There were no signs of a struggle, everything looked perfectly in place. But Shannon and the girls were gone. Chris, calm and polite, told police that his wife had gone to a friend's house with the kids. But his composure struck many as strange. Later, a neighbor's security footage revealed Chris backing his work truck into the driveway early that morning, a detail that would soon become central to the investigation. Within 2 days, the truth began to unravel. Chris failed a polygraph test and eventually confessed, first claiming that Shannon had hurt the children and that he reacted in anger, a story that investigators quickly proved false. Under questioning, he broke down and admitted that he had killed his wife and daughters. The confession shattered the illusion of the peaceful suburban home. The Watts residence, once filled with laughter and love, became a symbol of betrayal and tragedy. After his arrest, the house was sealed off as investigators processed the scene. They took photos of every room, the kitchen where Shannon prepared meals for her family, the children's bedrooms with their little beds still made, the basement where evidence of cleaning was found. Each image told a story of ordinary spaces now marked by unthinkable loss. Chris Watts was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole in November 2018. He was transferred from Colorado to a Wisconsin correctional facility for his own safety. Meanwhile, the house at 2825 Saratoga Trail stood empty. Neighbors described it as eerily quiet. The once bright and welcoming home was now a place of silence. No one mowed the lawn for months. Deliveries stopped. Curtains remained drawn. To those living nearby, it was as if the house itself had fallen asleep, holding its secrets in the still air. By 2019, the property entered foreclosure. No family stepped forward to buy it. Real estate agents who listed it later said that every potential buyer backed out. Some cited the weight of its history, others said they simply couldn't imagine raising children in a place tied to such tragedy. The bank took ownership, but even then, the house lingered on the market. The Watts case had made international headlines, and the address had become infamous. Curious onlookers sometimes drove by slowly, filming short videos or taking photos. For the neighbors, it was a constant reminder of what had happened, a story that refused to fade away. Over the years, the home changed in subtle ways. The paint weathered, the lawn grew wild, and the once-loved porch sat empty. The mortgage company quietly renewed listings, then removed them again. Zillow pages showed fluctuating values, $500,000, then $600,000, but the words, "off-market," remained. As the years passed, the Watts family home became more than just a property. It became a relic, a silent witness to everything that had unfolded inside. 7 years later, in 2025, the story of that house continues to fascinate and unsettle. For many, it raises questions that go beyond real estate or crime. How can a place once filled with so much love become a symbol of loss? And what does it mean for those who now walk past it, knowing what those walls once held? For some, 2825 Saratoga Trail is a cautionary story about appearances, about the difference between the image we show and the reality we live. For others, it's a reminder of how tragedy can haunt not just people, but places. As we continue this story, we'll explore what has become of the Watts house, how it stood empty for years, the failed attempts to sell it, and the recent updates that suggest a new chapter may have begun. But for now, in this first part of the story, we remember how it began, with a young couple buying their dream home, never imagining that it would one day become one of the most recognized crime scenes in America. After Chris Watts was sentenced to life in prison, the home he once shared with his family became an unresolved question, a physical remnant of everything that had happened. While the world moved on, the property at 2825 Saratoga Trail remained exactly where it always had been, its walls unchanged, its foundation undisturbed. But it no longer felt like a home. For months after the sentencing, the house sat vacant. A thin layer of dust gathered on the windowsills. The grass, once neatly trimmed by Chris on weekends, grew tall and uneven. Real estate signs came and went, but none stayed for long. Potential buyers would drive through the quiet neighborhood, slow down as they approached the house, and then keep driving. Neighbors said they could still picture the scene from that August morning, police cars lining the street, camera crews standing outside, and reporters whispering updates to their live feeds. The house, though innocent in itself, had become a symbol of something unbearable. In early 2019, the mortgage company officially took possession. Records from the Weld County Clerk's office show that the property went into foreclosure that spring. The debt owed on it was substantial, over $400,000. The house was scheduled for auction, but the sale never went through. Real estate agents later explained that buyers were hesitant, not only because of the price but because of what the address represented. To live there would mean to occupy the same space where Sean Ann, Bella, and Cece had lived their final days. It was too much for most people to imagine. Still, the house didn't decay. The community in Frederick is quiet, safe, and well-kept, and neighbors refuse to let the property turn into an eyesore. Volunteers occasionally trimmed the grass. Some residents even left small flowers near the mailbox, silent gestures of remembrance for the family that once lived there. At night, the streetlights illuminated the empty windows. Those who lived nearby said that sometimes, the house looked as if it was watching back, a dark shape at the end of the block that reminded them of everything they wished they could forget. As the years passed, the Watts case remained one of the most talked about true crime stories online. Documentaries were released, books were written, and social media discussions continued to dissect every detail. The home on Saratoga Trail became a recurring subject. YouTube creators filmed drive-by footage. News articles used its photos as thumbnails. Zillow traffic reports later showed that the Watts home received thousands of views each month, even though it wasn't listed for sale. Curious strangers searched its address, zooming in on the pictures of the exterior, wondering what the inside looked like after investigators had finished their work. In 2020 and 2021, small rumors surfaced that the property would finally go back to auction. County notices mentioned the address, but the listings were later withdrawn. The legal process was complex. because Chris still technically owned the home, and because no payments had been made since 2018, the bank had to navigate foreclosure laws while also dealing with the stigma attached to the crime. Through all of this, the house remained untouched. It stood, still furnished with pieces left behind, its blinds drawn, its interior frozen in time. Neighbors said that even years later, it looked exactly as it had before that August morning, as if waiting for a family that would never return. Some speculated that the town wanted the property gone, so that officials considered tearing it down. But that never happened. The home remained structurally sound and in a desirable area. And so it stayed. Too infamous to sell, too intact to demolish. As interest in the case continued, the Watts house became an example discussed in real estate forums about stigmatized properties, homes tied to tragic or violent events. Such properties often lose value, at least temporarily, but what made this one unique was its near-mythical reputation. By 2023, 5 years after the murders, the Saratoga Trail House had become a kind of modern landmark. Some visitors from outside Colorado admitted to driving by out of curiosity. Others saw it as a pilgrimage, an uncomfortable but compelling reminder of human fragility and the darkness that can hide behind ordinary walls. Meanwhile, the legal paperwork continued quietly behind the scenes. County documents showed changes in liens, tax adjustments, and bank filings. Yet for all those administrative movements, the physical house remained motionless. In late 2024, a small but significant change finally appeared in public records. Property databases showed that the home had been transferred to a new owner. After years of foreclosure listings and failed auctions, someone had finally purchased it. The recorded sale price hovered around $650,000, slightly above the average market value for the neighborhood, but much lower than the emotional cost attached to it. The new owner's name was not made public, as Colorado law allows buyers to shield personal information through limited liability companies. All that was known was that the property was now privately owned again. For the first time in 6 years, 2825, Saratoga Trail was no longer bank-held. Those who passed by began to notice subtle changes. The once faded paint on the front door looked fresh again. The porch light worked. Landscaping crews appeared for the first time in years. And though no one confirmed whether anyone had actually moved in, the house no longer looked abandoned. 7 years had nearly passed since the tragedy, and yet, even with a new owner, the story of the Watts house continued to evoke unease. Some people were relieved that the home had finally found closure, others wished it had been torn down. The conversation around the Watts case evolved too. Viewers revisited the footage of Chris's interviews, the police body cam recordings, the trial coverage. Documentaries examined his letters from prison and his claims of religious transformation. But no matter how much time passed, the image of that house remained, quiet, suburban, deceptively ordinary. For many, it represented the contrast between appearance and reality. A neatly kept home in a friendly neighborhood that concealed a breaking family. By 2025, the street had mostly returned to normal life. Children rode bicycles again. New families moved into nearby houses. The tragedy that once gripped the neighborhood had become a story told to newcomers who hadn't lived through it. But those who remembered could never see the Watts house as just another home. It had been the backdrop to an event that changed their understanding of safety, love, and human nature. As the years rolled forward, journalists occasionally checked the property records again. Each time, they found the same quiet confirmation: the house still stood, lived in or at least cared for, part of the town's landscape once more. Yet, even restored, it carried an invisible weight. Because some places, once marked by history, never fully returned to innocence. That's the paradox of 2825, Saratoga Trail, a house that began as a symbol of dreams, became a monument to tragedy, and then settled into uneasy silence. In the next and final part of this story, we'll look at what the Watts home represents today, its physical survival, its digital afterlife, and what it continues to teach us about memory, forgiveness, and the passage of time. 7 years. That's how long it has been since the tragedy that shook Frederick, Colorado, and sent ripples through homes across the world. 7 years since a quiet suburban street became the setting for one of the most haunting true crime stories in modern America. The Watts family's home still stands at 2825 Saratoga Trail, the same light-colored two-story with the small front porch and a 3-car garage. Yet today, it feels different, quieter, older, and heavier with memory. The front lawn, once unkempt and overgrown, is trimmed again. The mailbox is new. The street has changed too, new neighbors have come, others have moved away, and life has slowly reclaimed the area. But those who lived there long enough still lower their voices when the subject of the house comes up. Inside the Weld County property records, the story of the house is finally up to date. After years of uncertainty, the home was officially transferred in late 2024 to a private buyer through a limited liability company. The sale price was just over $650,000, a figure that marked both the end of its foreclosure saga and the beginning of a new chapter. For nearly 6 years, the home sat in legal limbo. The mortgage lender held title after the Watts loan went unpaid, and though foreclosure proceedings began as early as 2019, they stalled repeatedly due to court filings, ownership complications, and the sheer notoriety of the property. When it finally sold, it was a quiet transaction, no fanfare, no media coverage at first. Only later, through updated county databases and real estate tracking sites, did the news surface. Who bought it? No one knows for sure. The new ownership was filed under a business entity, a common way for investors or private individuals to keep their names off public record. Some speculate that it was purchased by someone planning to renovate and rent it discreetly. Others believe it was acquired simply to remove the stigma attached to it. To give the property, and the neighborhood, peace. Whatever the truth, one thing is clear, the house is alive again. Its utilities are active, its taxes current. For the first time since 2018, there are signs of ordinary life. Still, the past is not easily erased. Every time a documentary resurfaces, or a new online discussion revives the story, images of the house flood the internet again. A Google search of "Watts family home" still brings up the same exterior shots, the same drone footage, the same uneasy feeling of recognition. It has become a permanent part of true crime history, not because of its architecture or design, but because of what it represents. The story of the Watts family was never just about one night of violence. It was about perception, how social media can project perfection while hiding heartbreak. Shannon Watts, with her bright smile and online videos, appeared to be living the dream. Chris, quiet and seemingly gentle, appeared devoted. Their 2 daughters, Bella and Celeste, were always laughing, always surrounded by color. But inside that house, something was unraveling. And now, years later, the house remains the last physical witness to that unraveling. As of 2025, visitors still drive through Saratoga Trail occasionally, sometimes slowing down at the familiar corner. A few stop to take photos from their cars. Others simply look once and keep going. The people who live nearby have learned to accept it, the occasional outsider, the lingering interest. The new owners, whoever they are, have managed to maintain privacy. Curtains remain drawn, the light subtle, no personal items visible from the street. The house that once lived in the global spotlight now guards its quiet with determination. In a sense, it has come full circle, from dream home, to crime scene, to national headline, and finally back to just a house. But can a place ever truly return to normal after something like that? Criminologists often talk about psychological residue, the idea that tragedy leaves an emotional imprint not on the walls themselves, but on the way people perceive them. The Watts home embodies that theory. Even after its sale, even after its restoration, its name evokes emotion. For the local community, the tragedy changed the way people think about safety, trust, and family. For the true crime world, it became a study in hidden lives and deception. For others, it became a moral or spiritual reflection, about forgiveness, guilt, and what it means to move forward. Chris Watts himself remains in Dodge Correctional Institution in Waupun, Wisconsin, serving multiple life sentences without the possibility of parole. Reports over the years suggest he has turned to religion, claiming he's been forgiven by God and that he's a changed man. But outside the prison walls, forgiveness is more complicated. For many, the loss is too deep, the act too brutal. Shanann's family, the Razuseks, continue to honor her and the children through remembrance and advocacy. They have chosen privacy over publicity in recent years, quietly preserving the memory of their daughter and granddaughters away from the chaos of the internet. And so, while Chris remains confined, the house, the one he once proudly called home, stands free, bathed again in the sunlight of suburban life. It has seen seasons pass, neighbors come and go, and the slow fading of media attention. But every now and then, when the wind rustles through the trees or a passerby looks twice at the address, a faint awareness lingers. That awareness, the knowledge of what happened, the empathy for the lives lost, the reflection on how ordinary things can hide extraordinary darkness, is what keeps the story alive. Today, 7 years later, the Watts home no longer makes headlines. It's not a spectacle anymore. It's simply there, a quiet structure on a quiet street, carrying an extraordinary history within its ordinary walls. But for those who followed the story from the beginning, it will always be more than just wood and brick. It is a symbol of love that turned to tragedy, of a community shaken but resilient, of memory that refuses to fade. And as time goes on, it reminds us of something deeper. That homes are more than places we live. They are containers of our choices, our secrets, our joys, and our failures. The Watts house, now repainted and renewed, stands as both warning and witness, that what happens behind closed doors can define not only the people inside, but the memory of the place itself. 7 years later, the echoes remain. Soft, but unforgettable. And perhaps, in the quiet of that Frederick Street, forgiveness and remembrance can finally coexist.